This week on Under the Radar, we'll be looking at the upside to the antics of social justice warriors. So back in January on the Joe Rogan podcast, Jordan Peterson said that he'd figured out how to monetize SJWs.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to because it's just so goddamn funny. I can't help but say it. I figured out how to monetize social justice warriors.
That is what it is.
I know, it's so funny. I just can't believe it.
The other way.
It just, every time I think that, well, it's just one of the surreal circumstances that characterize my life. It's like I'm driving the social justice activists in Canada mad because if they let me speak, then I get to speak, and then more people support me on Patreon. It's like, that's annoying. It's like, goddamn capitalist, he's making more money off this ideological warfare. It's like, okay, fine, let's go protest him. So they go protest me, and then that goes up on YouTube, and then my Patreon account goes way up. So it's like, they don't know what to do.
So I want to explore this idea that SJWs are actually self-defeating in their own actions and benefit those that oppose them. Now, in recent days and weeks, there's been a number of, let's call them protests or attempts at no-platforming speakers. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the attempted sabotage of an event at Portland State University featuring James Damore, Helen Pluckrose, Heather Haying and Peter Boghossian talking about diversity. Now, the full version of that event has emerged, and I want to play the couple of minutes leading up to the moment the purple-haired SJW has a meltdown.
James argues, accurately, that there are differences between men and women. This is a strange position to be in, to be arguing for something that is so universally and widely accepted within biology. What is not as widely accepted is that culture is also evolutionary, but I'm going to argue that biology and culture are both evolutionary. Let's look at differences between men and women that are explicitly anatomical and physiological. Are men taller than women on average? Does anyone take offense at that fact? Are you irritated?
There's always a standout.
So I would say you could be irritated by it. You could be irritated by the fact that women have to be the ones to gestate and lactate. You could be irritated by a lot of truths. But taking offense is a response that is rejection of reality.
Now, I think what was interesting there was the moment the protesters decided to walk out. Just as Heather Haying was stating some obvious, well-established biological differences between men and women, and that to get offended by them constitutes a rejection of reality. And that's a theme that is recurrent in all these protests, a rejection of reality, an inability or unwillingness to engage in conversation. And, of course, this.
That is not okay. Even the women in there have been brainwashed.
Should not listen to fascism. It should not be tolerated in civil society. Nazis are not welcome in civil society.
Fuck the police! Power to the people! Thank you.
That's right, the tried and tested, everyone I disagree with is a fascist. And of course, women like Heather Haying and Helen Pluckrose must be brainwashed, suffering from a form of internalised misogyny. Again, no attempt to construct an argument or make a point, just a mindless repetition of bigotry bingo phrases. Now let's move on to the next exhibition of SJW stupidity. You've probably seen by now the footage from King's College where Sargon was having a discussion with Yaron Brook. Yaron Brook is a Randian objectivist. Not that that matters in the world of the SJW. He's, of course, just another form of fascist. Now, this one is a little different, as the protesters are not just students. They include those stunning and brave characters that are too cowardly to show their faces in public, Antifa. no fascists on campus. Well, it turns out the campus police agreed with that and ejected some of those fascists from the campus grounds.
People die! The lefties die! People die! Lefties die! Fuck Antifa! Fuck Antifa! Fuck Antifa! Fuck Antifa!
Picture makeup clean. Guys, we're ready.
Grab him! Don't let him go! Ray, someone get ready.
Again, their intentions are clear. They're not there to listen. They make no attempt to make arguments. It's about disruption and calling everyone a fascist. And Sargon was the real winner here, taking home an Antifa flag as a trophy. Now let's move on to Clark College in progressive Portland, where Christina Hoff Sommers tried to deliver a speech to the Clark Law School, ironically titled, given the reaction, "The Closing of the Feminist Mind."
We choose to protest male supremacy, not give it a platform. Christina Sommers has repeatedly delegitimized the suffering of women worldwide. But we believe our siblings and our comrades. Women are not liars with victim mentalities. Rape culture is not a myth. Microaggressions are real. The gender gauge gap is real. Trans people are real. Trans lives matter. Black lives matter.
Yeah.
Okay, trash. We can't leave.
So,
are you done? It's okay.
like,
It's okay. What side are you on, friends? What side are you on? What side are you on, friends? What side are you on? No platform for fascists, no platform at all. And we will fight for justice until Christina's gone. Which side are you on, friends? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, friends? Which side are you on?
Well, I doubt many of them are on your side. And yes, you did hear that right. I guess male supremacy is a thing now since the SPLC asserted it into existence. And yes, she did say comrades, and her jacket does say stay woke. Now, as opposed to the previous protests, she does have some, well, not exactly arguments, but bullet points, albeit delivered in an obnoxious, intolerant manner. And I actually agree with some of them. Yes, the gender pay gap, or more precisely the gender earnings gap, is real. It's the explanation for that gap, that it is due to some type of systematic discrimination, that is a fiction. But it appears this crowd isn't interested in exploring the nuances of that type of debate. Now, of course, what would a social justice protest be without calling everyone a fascist? Christina Hoff Sommers a fascist? Seriously? Here's what one of the protesters said to the local news after the event.
But protesters were outraged. Sommers was allowed to speak at all.
I think first and foremost what's on my mind is protesting giving a platform to someone who espouses essentially hate speech, male supremacist speech.
Now, yes, everyone I disagree with is a fascist, and therefore everything they say is hate speech. Notice she couldn't even get her bigotry bingo words right, confusing white supremacy with male supremacy. That's what happens when you're just used to spewing slogans instead of making arguments. And finally, we return to Jordan Peterson, who was invited to inaugurate a lecture series at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. This is the reception he received.
No freedom for hate speech!
No freedom for hate speech!
Whose campus?
Our campus!
Whose campus?
Our campus!
Attending is publicity!
Attending is publicity!
Attending is complicity!
Attending is
Attending
publicity!
is complicity!
No freedom of choice.
No freedom for hate speech!
Whose campus?
Our campus!
I can't hear you.
Our campus!
Louder!
Our campus!
supremacy! Fuck white 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 supremacy!
As embarrassing as what's happening, embarrassing to me, I think what it does for the nation is show how important we're doing here and how weak people are.
Now, apparently a woman who isn't a student at Queen's stood on one of the building's window ledges during the protest and started to bang on the window, causing it to break and cutting her own hand. They say she fled the scene but was stopped nearby by plainclothes officers who had to bring in extra officers when the woman became violent during her arrest. Police add that the woman also tried to kick out the cruiser's window while she was being transported to police headquarters. Officials say officers searched her backpack and found a weapon, a metal wire with handles, commonly known as a garrote. She was charged with mischief, assaulting police, possession of a weapon for a dangerous purpose, and for carrying a concealed weapon. Charming. So let's recap. Mild-mannered James Damore, the Clark Kent of IT, is a fascist. Heather Haying and Helen Pluckrose are brainwashed. Sargon is a fascist. Yaron Brook is a fascist. Christina Hoff Sommers a fascist. And Jordan Peterson is, of course, a fascist. And what's the point of presenting this cavalcade of incoherent, intolerant stupidity? Well, it's to point out that there is an upside to all this. As Jordan Peterson noted, he's been able to monetize them. But more to the point, it means people like James Damore, Sargon and Christina Hoff Sommers garner more attention. The SJW and Antifa idiots are some of the best publicity you could possibly want, because if you're being opposed by these fools, then most people will conclude by default that you must be the sensible one. And then there is the knock-on effect of reputational damage to the universities that allow this stuff. Clark College, for example, has now hastily put together a forum next week about free speech and academic freedom. So don't despair, there is an upside to social justice warriors, and that is they are the best advertisements for why you shouldn't become one. I'll see you next time.